Just one thing. One thing is at the end when we have questions, turn off the recording, please.
Okay, very good. I'm
Okay,
trying to figure out
by
how
the
to
way,
mute
yeah.
everyone. How do I mute everyone?
Okay.
Is everybody muted?
I'll mute myself.
Can everybody mute themselves? Because I'm not seeing this here. Audio settings, maybe? All right. So everybody, Boker Tov. Let me just get back. Okay, so a couple of caveats. First of all, as I had said earlier, this presentation is on the living Beit Sha'arim, not Beit Shan. Sorry for that error. And it is also the living Beit Sha'arim. What I intended by that was the areas that we can see of the village of Beit Sha'arim, not the necropolis. So we're not touching on why most people go to the Gan Leumi of Beit Sha'arim. We're looking at those elements of what made Beit Sha'arim such a central village 2,000 years ago and at other different periods. Second caveat is, B'li Ayin Hara, we're all home, and it could very well be that I have various kids and dogs coming in and out of the room, so we'll just have to make do. And the third, not caveat, but comment that I have is that this is a site that is so rich in potential for guiding in many different kivunim. So what I had intended with this presentation was to present a whole plethora of options for guides to choose from, and you curate on your own. If you had intended to use this site as really what its main focus is, which I think is Big Vot HaSanhedrin, in the footsteps of the Sanhedrin, then it is an extremely rich site. If you were doing a biblical tour of the Galil and wanted to focus more on the biblical stories, this is also a fabulous site to include in your repertoire. If you wanted to focus on the modern period of Hityashut, Batzafon or Bagalil, then this is also a wonderful site, and we'll see soon why that is. Really the possibilities here are endless, and so there's quite a bit of information. I also am happy to share these slides with you so you can have all of the sources. I don't know if we'll have time to get to all the sources. I'm limiting myself to, what is it, a half an hour that we said we do, each one of us? So I'm going to try and do that and then take questions at the end. Okay, so where we are right now, there'll be a picture in a couple of slides, is by the Pesel of Alexander Zaid. This is in the neighborhood of Beit Zaid, which is Givat El Shikun Ela, in the broader Kiryat Tivon, right close to not the Moshav of Beit Sha'arim, but it's very easily, you can get there on Waze. It's not difficult. You just, as far as accessibility is concerned, if you're coming with a big bus, I park the bus on the road that's leading to the Gan Leumi, and everybody makes their way up. I know there are alternative ways to go, but sometimes those are more difficult. If you have a private car, you can just zip on up with the car. I'm by that whole area of that's known as Pesel Alexander Zaid, and the first thing that you could talk about there is talking about the Nof, what it is that you're seeing. And so when you're at, maybe we'll hold that for a later slide, because I think that I have a picture there and then we can orient everyone. So we'll just jump ahead beyond the Nof and beyond just the central location of Givat Alonim, of the Alonim region of the Galil, and we'll talk about the biblical period. Now, everybody just reminding you to mute yourselves. Where we're located right now is in Nahalat Zvulun. And it's right at this gorgeous nexus of Zvulun, Issachar, Asher, and Menashe. So it's a wonderful opportunity to talk about the different tribal territories. And you can see based on the topography exactly why Emek Yisrael spread out in front of you is Yisachar, and Ramot Menashe up there to the south is Menashe, and the Carmel is the southern point of Asher. And we are now in Zvulun. It's very easy to see based on the low hills of the Galil, the topography of the southern part of the Nachalav Zvulun. So here I just brought for you Psukim from Yehoshua Yudtet, talking about the boundary of Zvulun. Vayhi gvul nachalatam ad Sarid. I'm in Pasuk Yud in Perek Yudtet. The lower portion started with Sarid. Just remember these names: Sarid, Marala, and Dabashet, because that's the southern portion. And if we move on, I starred them here for you. Okay, Tel Sarid is Tel Shadud, which is just south of, here we go, okay, which you can see is right south of Migdal HaEmek in the general northern Emek Yisrael region, close to Nahalal. And then the border of Zvulun passes up this way, following the line of Reches, Natzrat. Sorry, I'm trying to do it with my mouse here, if you can see. Reches, Natzrat, and pulling over to the western Galil, hitting Ramat Yishai, which is Tel Risim, a likely candidate for Marala. And then over here, this big star is Sheikh Avrich, which is that building that you see, tomb that you see when you're in Pesel, Alexander Zaid, which is likely to be the Dabeshet that we were looking at, because Dabeshet means a hump, and the topography sticks out like a hump. So you can talk about the border of Zvulun. When you're there, you can look out over the whole Emek, and you can talk there about the battle of Barak and Dvorah, over and against, or Neged, Yavin, and Sisra, because it's playing out there according to the consensus opinion by Nachal Kishon. So you could point out Nachal Kishon, which is basically cutting over to the west of the Emek and then following up Route 6 at the foot of Carmel. You could talk about look over to the Carmel. This is a wonderful place to talk about the battle of or the showdown between Eliyahu and the Nevi'ei Habal, because you can see the Mufraka clear as day, and you can discuss the meaning of Mufraka. You can discuss Tel Kashish, excuse me, which is right at the foot of the Carmel there. I'm pointing it out. There's the Mufraka. Here it's Tel Kassis over here. Can you see? And it's just a great opportunity to discuss Eliyahu then chasing Achab all the way down to Yisrael. You can talk about the story in Malachim Bet, Perek Daled, about Elisha up here in the footsteps of his master Eliyahu, and the Isha Shunamit down here by Afula, and making her way up here to beseech Elisha to save her son. And finally, the last, that's normally how I start there. And I always like to talk about the Nevuah of Hoshea, where he's talking about Emek Yisrael as a curse, and how then it turns into a marvelous blessing. I'm not going to go into the details there, but it's Hoshea, Aleph, and Bet, and have a look at it yourself. The Zarati Hali Ba'aretz, how Yisrael turns from this Hiroshima type place into one of the classic examples of the Geula happening in our day through the fertility of the land itself, and point to all of the Yishuvim within the northern Emek Yisrael. Okay, so that is one kivun to take, talking about the biblical stories. If you were then to use that nof to jump to the modern period, and we are at the Pesel of Alexander Zaid, as I had said, right next to the Pesel, let's see if we move forward a little bit. going to go switch up the pictures a little bit. Here's a great map also showing Tel Shadud, up here to Tel Risim, and then over here to Sheikh Avrich. You can see, based on the topography, the natural southwestern border of Zvulun. Okay, here we go, Sheikh Avrich. So Sheikh Avrich was, some say, it is the burial place of Barak ben Avinoam. It is not in Nachalat Naphtali, it's clearly in Nachalat Zvulun. You see there in the background, you see Givat HaMoreh, right? And then you see off to the right, the Hare Gilboa. So that's also, if you wanted to extend out to Gidon talk, but you can really capture this note and do a lot with it in terms of biblical stories that take place in this area. And so Sheikh Avrich, if it's not the kever of Barak ben Avinoam, which it most likely isn't, was a kever of a sheikh who was known as Ivrich, which in Arabic means a baz. And he would carry around holy water and would heal people with the holy water. So this became a place of pilgrimage for the sick and the ill. And Raid Salah, the mayor of Al-Faham, or I think he used to be the mayor of Al-Faham, every Friday buses in at least 200 pilgrims to make sure that the site remains active as a Muslim holy site. This, for our purposes of Alexander Zaid, was the home that Zaid developed for his family in 1926. Zaid is a legendary figure of the second Aliyah. He could be spoken about in the same breath as Yisrael and Manya Shochat, David Ben Gurion, Berl Katznelson, etc. Now, his mother was a Subotnik, which is really a topic for another time, born in Siberia, and he came here in 1904, and he was very devoted to the labor socialist movement of the ideologues of the second Aliyah. He helped found Kfar Giladi, and then moved here in 1926, and his job was to guard over all of the Yishuvim and Moshavim of the Israel Valley. And so he did that, but he did that coming from a background of founding Bar Giora, which is the first defense force, as it were, a group that decided that Jews should be defending our own settlements, which was followed, that was in 1907, followed soon on the heels in 1909 by the founding of HaShomer. So Bar Giora, by the way, just a little tidbit, was founded on Motzei Simchat Torah in 1907, and exactly 100 years from that point, there was a vandalism of Alexander Zaid's statue. Arabs came and removed the statue exactly 100 years from Zaid's founding of the first Jewish defense force. Zaid was murdered by Bedouin in 1938, and he is memorialized here. And I think that this is also a wonderful opportunity for someone who wants to do a tour along the theme of the HaShomer, Bar Giora, to start here with Alexander Zaid. And usually what happens when I give these tours is that it's usually Beit HaSanhedrin. So I start with Beit Sharim, and then I'll move on to Tzipori and move further on to Tveria. Usha is not yet developed enough, I feel, to really warrant a trip up there. And Shfaram is very hard to access there, definitely not the ruins from this time. So that's my normal kivun. And I like starting with Zaid and then picking up the story of Shomer HaChadash in Mitzvah Sanzo. When you're going on 77 and you're right before Tzomet Hoshaya and you see that big Israeli flag on the little Gib'ah near the ruins of Shechem, right by Tzipori, you can see the Mitzudan Tzipori off to your right as you're going towards the east on 77. Mitzpah Sanzo was where Yoel Zilberstein founded founded the new Shomer, HaShomer HaChadash, which we all know about in 2009, I believe. So it's a nice continuation of the story. And then if you want to continue that before, then you're all invited to my farm where we have Shomer HaChadash, people actually making sure that what's going on is staying safe. So it's nice to see Alexander Said, the legend, followed through in his own backyard, as it were, in the modern period. Okay, so now that we have dealt with the Nof from a biblical standpoint, and we have dealt with the modern period, we make sure now that you can see a little bit, this is the best picture that I have of the Nof, that you talk about Wadi Milch, that you could talk about Ramat Menashe, everything that you have there, even beyond the biblical period, to make it come alive. Now we're going to talk about really the gem that is Beit Sha'arim from its heyday, which was from the 2nd and 3rd century Common Era. Here's Alexander Said, a famous statue. Here's this great picture of him. Doesn't he look like a second Aliyah hero? Here we go. Okay, so Josephus, our source from the Roman period, first-person source, is placing us in his home turf, which is, or at least for a number of years, was his home turf, which was the Galil. Look at how he puts it in words. As for that Galilee, which is called the lower, it extends in length from Tiberias to Zebulun. So he is still identifying the territory as Zebulun, even though Zebulun was no longer, since 732 BCE, when Tiglath-Pileser III exiled all the 10 tribes. But it still carries the name of Zebulun. And the maritime place Ptolemais, which is Akko, is its neighbor. Its breadth is from a village called Sulot, which lies in the Great Plain. We all know Emek Sulot is between Givat HaMoreh and Reches Natzrat, as far as, I can't even use that here. Okay, so that is, and he described, sorry, hold on. Let's go back. There we are. Okay, so he describes the Galil as extraordinarily fecund, extraordinarily fruitful and productive. 204 cities, villages. He says that the least city contains about however many thousand inhabitants. Again, I'm cut off here. 15,000 inhabitants. That's a grand exaggeration, but that was where it was at. If you were a Jew living in the land of Israel in the Roman period, especially after the Bar Kokhba revolt, you were most likely up here in one of these cities like Tiberia or Tzipori or Akko, or in one of these villages like Vuma, like Shichim, like Beit Sha'arim, like Usha, and you did not have that difficult of a life, especially if you were living in the end of the 2nd and beginning of the 3rd century Common Era. Moving along. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so again, Josephus is going to continue on in a different book in his life story, and he is going to mention the name of Beit Sha'arim as he knew it, which was Basara, which is the Greek version of Beit Sha'arim. Look at how he puts it, that as he is fortifying the north in 66 and 67 against the onslaught, actually 67, 68, against the onslaught of the Romans, that he is using Beit Sha'arim as a stored city because it was so wealthy that Berenice, who was the sister of Agrippus II, right? Agrippus II was the puppet king, as it were, was still in somewhat of power at that period. He only died in the 90s Common Era. Bernice was then the concubine of Titus, but she was granted this area, which was so wealthy, and this is where she stored her wheat. Now Josephus commandeered that storehouse for his own purposes, for his troops, and he mentions here, and had been gathered together out of the neighboring villages into Basara, and he was in the city of Basara, which is Beit Sha'arim. Now, I'm not going to, for lack of time, I'm not going to go too deeply into these sources. I like these sources for their color in describing Beit Sha'arim as a Jewish city, or a Jewish village, what a Jewish village in the Galilee, even perhaps before its heyday, might have looked like. And we can even look at that window of post-destruction of the temple and pre-Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, where it was a flourishing village, but it hadn't really reached its full-on potential. By the way, there were ruins from Beit Sha'arim going back to the Israelite period, very scant. So we're not quite sure what was going on there in a full picture, but the ruins then continue on through the Persian period, through the Hellenistic period. Again, a really more like a chava. Who knows what it looked like then? Very, very little then. It really exploded and developed in this period of the 1st and 2nd century Common Era. And here we're looking at some sources that deal with the mechatat. When anyone wanted to enter the Beit HaMikdash, they had to be free of Tumat HaMet. And how do you free yourself of Tumat HaMet? You have to use this special mixture called mechatat, involving the ashes of the Parah Aduma. And you see here in the Mishnah in Parah, the first one that I brought here, that the ashes were divided for ease of the population into 3 regions. One was kept in the Beit HaMikdash structure, the Chel. Another one was kept on the Mount of Olives, Har HaMishcha. And the third was spread out throughout the country so that if you had Kohanim especially, or anyone who wanted to free themselves of Tamet, then they could do so. Before and after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, but particularly after the destruction, which indicates to us that this was a site perhaps of a Mishmeret of Kohanim, or it was a site that was a central site where people would come and cleanse themselves in it, or achieve tahara through the mechatat. This was also a site where they found stone vessels, also strengthening the succession that sits inside of Kohanim. And we know that it was found here because this mechatat, because in the Tosefta here, it adds on the detail that a vessel that contained mechatat was cut to chatach shoferet b'Beit Sha'arim. So that detail is added on for us that we see the resolve of the Kohanim and of Am Yisrael to maintain the purity, maybe because they felt that the Beit HaMikdash would be rebuilt soon in their days, or maybe because the Kohanim were still keeping to the stricture of only eating chulin in a purified state. Just reminding everyone to mute their phones, mute their computers. So Beit Sha'arim was this hub for Kohanim, really useful if you have Kohanim among your clients and you can't take them down to the necropolis in Beit Sha'arim, but you still are able to showcase Beit Sha'arim. Moving right along. Okay, now Beit Sha'arim reaches its fame in Jewish history based on the movement of the Sanhedrin away from Judea and into the Galilee. Now, some will date this during the time of the mission. Some will date it a little bit later, which is within the 90s, Common Era. Some will date it later to the time of Trajan, 117, and a little bit beyond that. But that was the kind of back and forth between Yavne, Ucha, Yavne. But after the Mered Bar Kokhba, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, which ended in disaster and travesty for Judea in 135, the Sanhedrin up and moved to the north, and that is where they stayed. And then you can see in Masechet Rosh Hashanah the movement there from Yavne to Usha to Shparam to Beit Sha'arim. Now, who moved the Sanhedrin from Shparam to Beit Sha'arim? None other than our hero when we talk about Beit Sha'arim, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. All right. Now, I bring this here as a fun illustration of another tack you can take, which is if you wanted to follow in Chagi Amitzor's footsteps and actually do the Shvil HaSanhedrin, and it's a 120-kilometer Shvil that actually starts right here in Beit Sha'arim. It should really start in Usha, but for historical purposes. This, for logistical purposes, is where it starts. I just wanted to point out here, you can see the Shviel HaSanhedrin marker here. You have the blue and the red and the green. The green is the Galil. The red is meant to indicate the Argaman, the royalty of the Sanhedrin. And the blue indicates the direction towards Tiberia, towards the Kinneret, because the Sanhedrin is moving from Beit Sha'arim over to the east, Zipori, and further over to the east to Tiberia. Okay, now, Beit Sha'arim, what I've neglected to mention is, how does it get its name? So there are two suggestions. One is based on, I guess, etymology, and another one is based on archaeology. So the most accepted suggestion up until quite recently is Beit Sha'arim gets its name from what I had mentioned before with Berenice, this abundance that really was illustrated in Beit Sha'arim. And if you remember the pasuk in Breshit, Vayizra Yitzchak be'eretz hahi vayimtza b'shana hahi mea she'arim vayivarcheu Hashem. So this idea of she'arim, of gates, indicates open gates, bracha, and abundance. Or Adi Ehrlich, who is that archaeologist from University of Haifa, who's been excavating there for the last 6 summers. She found there's already been a gate that had been discovered in Beit Sha'arim, which you see as you're passing and you're going towards the Pesach Alexander Zaid. But there's another gate that she discovered just a couple of years back, a monumental gate, in the northeastern side of the site. So she says maybe Beit Sha'arim gets its name from the fact that it was surrounded by gates, even though only 2 have been discovered up until now. But that's another suggestion. Now, this site, Rebbe in Beit Sha'arim, is known primarily because of the fame that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi achieved in Jewish history. So famous, he's known only as Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rebbe. And here I bring you 2 sources that demonstrate his fame. The Zarach Hashem Shubah Hashamash, Amar Rabba Bakahana. Don't we know that the sun rises and sets? Shimsho shel tzaddik, Mazriach shimsho shel tzaddik charero. Yom shemet Rabbi Akiva, when Rabbi Akiva had passed, Nolad Rabbeinu. Karu alav v'zarach Hashem shubah Hashamash. So, of the same fame as Rabbi Akiva is his inheritor, as it were, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Tzedek tzedek tirdof, haloch achar beit din yafeh, achar Rabbi lebeit Sha'arim. Follow Rabbi to Beit Sha'arim. And when Rebbe came to Beit Sha'arim, he didn't just found Beit Sha'arim. It was already, as I had said, an active city. It was the city of Reb Yochanan ben Nuri, who was a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, and he was known as the Rabbi Akiva of the North. And he had various sages come to him in Beit Sha'arim and already consult with him. So Beit Sha'arim had already achieved a certain notoriety in the days of Rebbe. Rebbe lived towards the end of the 2nd century, beginning of the 3rd century, extraordinarily wealthy. Hold on. Okay. How are we doing with time? If anyone listen, I'm just going to keep on going. If you need to cut out, then cut out, okay? But I feel I was gypped towards the beginning. So
be happy if you would keep going. Very happy if you would keep going.
All right, we're just going to keep on going, and if you need to cut out, then cut. So when Rebbe came to Beit Sha'arim, why did he move the Sanhedrin from Shfaram to Beit Sha'arim? That's a classic question. His father, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, was most active in Usha, and in those days, Usha, the Sanhedrin moved to Shfaram, which was a slightly larger city than Usha. If you go up to the excavations of Usha, you'd see that it's quite contained and modest. Shfaram was slightly larger, and then Rebbe moved down to Beit Sha'arim. Now, there are 2 suggestions I'm familiar with. One suggestion is that, as we had mentioned, Berenice had all of the wealth of Beit Sha'arim. It was clearly a neches. It was clearly something that was valuable that Agrippus had given to her as her Yerusha. And Rebbe apparently had acquired this or had inherited all of the surrounding area. So he is going closer to his, for lack of a better term, place of business, closer to his farm, to his lands. That's one answer. But even a better answer is that if you follow the trace of the Sanhedrin in the north, then you see that the Sanhedrin is going into further and further east, but more importantly, they're moving from the kfar to the ir, slowly, slowly, slowly. It would be as if you moved from my moshav, which has like 3 people, to a yishuv, just like Beit Sha'arim, which is nice and tough and very nicely laid out with, as you see in front of you, some monumental buildings, and then eventually moving to a cosmopolitan area like Tzipori and then Tiberia. So that is the movement. Beit Sha'arim, although it's a kfar, although it's just a yishuv, still was quite wealthy. You can see here, what I like, we're still in the same area, the Pesach Alexander Zaid, but you know that there are excavations that were conducted here in the 30s and the 50s and in our present day. This is where Adi Erlich is excavating right now. And so one of the classic sites to take people to, if you wanted to do in the kivun of the Mishnah, you wanted to be teaching Mishnayot in the area in which these Mishnayot were developed, and Breitot were developed, and the Tosefta was developed, and the Midrashay Halacha, and some Midrashay Agadah, etc. This is a wonderful place to sit and teach Mishnah. This is the Basilica, which is, you can see here, you have the central nave, and then you have on the side, divided into 3 areas. Now there are 8 pillars here and 8 pillars here. Don't make the mistake that a lot of people make. And that is using the site to try and tie it into a rabbinic source. When I was first guided on the site, my guide, I couldn't say who it was, quoted this Yerushalmi and said, look at this building in front of you. It is a building that has 8 pillars. And here is Yerushalmi and a Reuven that says, Rebbe matir etc. bebeit shiraye. That Rebbe allows in terms of bringing from a Rishut HaYachid to another Rishut HaYachid, that he allows for the etc. in Beit Sha'arim. And this must be the etc. because the number of pillars are discussed within the context of this matter. I don't have time now to go into it. We can talk afterwards if you'd like a fuller explanation. This can't possibly be an etc. because an etc. is not a closed basilica type building. Etc. is more of a mavoy. It's more of a temporary colonnade, a walking colonnade that's roofed, but that's why Rebbe would have allowed it as a means to getting from one private area to another private area. And the etc. Hi, Booby, you can come in. And the Exedra of Beit Sha'arim was discovered within the house complex of Rebbe. So if you want to talk about this midrash, then you can. Sorry, then you can talk about it at the other archaeological area, which is the house of Rebbe. Use this area to talk about the fact that we have tremendous access to what archaeology means in Eretz Yisrael. Look at this gorgeous aerial site. This is from, I think, the 2017 or 18 season of Adi Erlich's excavation. And it just amazes people to take a look at this, and you see you're walking on this ground and you had no idea that right underneath you lies this gorgeous city with private homes, with borot mayim, with a mikvah, a few mikvaot that were discovered. The basilica is there for everyone to see, but here you have lots that you can access now if you go to Beit Sha'arim and want to talk about archaeology. Here you see a Byzantine wall superimposed on a Roman era mikvah. So this was a village that was destroyed in the 4th century, either in the revolt of Gallus, and then the Romans would destroy much of the north in that revolt, or it was destroyed by an earthquake about a decade later. But there was an attempt to resuscitate it. It didn't really take off. So there are scant Byzantine remains, mostly Roman. And here you see what Ehrlich excavated in 2018, which is a pottery kiln. There was so much industry. You're going to be familiar with the Beit, with the whole olive industry that you pass as you're going to the Pesel Alexander Zaid on that left side. I'll show you a picture in a second to orient you. But there was also a lead installation that was found. You know about the glass manufacturing from down in the necropolis. And here you have pottery as well. And obviously all of the wealth of the surrounding fields that allowed for Beit Sha'arim to be quite a well-to-do yishuv, let's put it that way. Definitely not some backwards chor. Okay, here we go. I have left Pesel Alexander Zaid and that whole area, and moved down to the house of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. On my way down, if you see this road, oh, sorry, hold on. No, what's going on? Okay, just trying to orient everyone. You see this little sign there that says Sha'ar Ha'ir. I don't know if you're remembering, as you're entering into, towards getting to the Gan Leumi, you pass by some archaeological ruins on the left, and that's what we're going to be looking at now. And usually you just point it out on the bus. Oh, look, there's the gate of the city. Look, there's the olive press. The olive press was what I had discussed a minute ago. And here's one of the gates that leads Ehrlich to believe that Beit Sha'arim is named thus because of the numerous gates that were discovered. And here is the olive press, not really much to look at. Okay, now, this is really a wonderful place to discuss Rebbe, because what we're looking at now is you can get off of the bus or out of your car and you can go and access this in the same way that you can that whole southern area that's up on the top of the Gib'ah where the Pesel of Zaid is. This is labeled Beit Knesset. But what we're looking at now is not the Beit Knesset. I just want to orient you a little bit. Here I am looking north. So if I were to continue on that road over there, I would make my way to the Gan Leumi, the necropolis. But you see that arch there. Realize that that arch supported the first floor of this massive house. So what those first rooms are that you get to here, okay, here's where, let me see if I can just move all of you people out of the way so I can get to my slides. There we go. Okay, so what we're looking at right now in that previous picture is right over here, supported a whole basement structure, okay? And when they talk about the Beit Knesset of Beit Sha'arim, this is what they're talking about. An area that you cannot get to because it is covered by Beit Zayed, by the house of Alexander Zaid's descendants. And here is here's a picture when it was excavated back in the 60s. Nachman Abigad and Binyamin Mazar. Binyamin Mazar did in the 30s, and then he helped Abigad in the 50s. It is quite impressive. Obviously that facade is just an artist's rendering of what the Beit Knesset would have looked like, but you see that intact staircase that led up to the facade of the Beit Knesset. Now, Abigad believes the Beit Knesset is from the 4th century, so we're post-dating it, we're putting it past Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Again, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi died in 220. He redacted the Mishnah at the end of his life in Sipori, from 203 to 220, the last 17 years of his life, he was in Sipori. But from the second half of the 2nd century through 203, he was in Beit Sha'arim, the latter half of the 2nd century. And this most likely is not a Beit Knesset that he would have been accessing, according to the archaeologists. Bringing you back for a second to that etc., that wonderful source that we have in the Yerushalmi, the etc. is located between that monumental house that we're going to look at right now and the Beit Knesset. So it is located over here. They found a 8-pillared structure over here. You can't see it, and I don't know exactly where to point it out, but I would talk about that particular source here. When people are asking, where would you bring that source? I would bring it when I was over here in the ruins, talk about the connection between this structure up here and this structure back here. Moving right along. All right, some of the very impressive capitals that were in the synagogue, that were in the Beit Knesset, Corinthian capitals. This is not your mama's kfar. This is something really impressive. This isn't some just, backwater, again, chor. This had monumental structures. You saw in the basilica that there were dressed stones. You see these amudim. You see these capitals. And it indicates that here we're moving more toward an ayara, I would say, like a small town. There we go. All right. Now, this is such a rich site to be able to talk about Rebbe and his life. I'm not going to go into a whole shiur about Rebbe and his life, but I'll bring some sources here that you can use about that house itself of Rebbe. This is a great one. And I'll send you the slideshow, whoever wants, but just in a nutshell, I'll paraphrase. Reb Pinchas ben Yair, who was known as this tremendous tzaddik that everybody looked up to among the Tanaim, would never accept invitations to private people's homes because, just like any good local Orthodox rabbi, he didn't want to get into a sticky situation as far as food is concerned, etc. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rebbe, the Nasi, heard that he was in the area and he invited him to come, and Reb Pinchas ben Yair agreed. And then Reb Pinchas ben Yair, on his way in, saw that he was passing by white mules. Now, white mules were known at that time to be a very dangerous type of mule that could cause a lot of harm to property and to people. So he said, oh, you go into a house of someone who would be raising white mules. So then the rest of the story continues on. So this is a story that happens in this context. I kind of let the cat out of the bag. This monumental building that you see is none other than Rebbe's house. It is dated to the 2nd century CE. They found colored mosaic tiles, which indicates great wealth. And beyond that, they found, oops. Did I stop there? No, here we go. Okay. Oh, I guess I didn't even bring those pictures in the slideshow. I'm sorry. Beyond here, I'll go back to this picture over here. Okay. Beyond that, they found in this area, here we go, no, sorry, here we go. In this area over here, which is the basement, and it's under the floor that was supported by that arch, they found stables right over here. These are stables. They found, these were storerooms. You would go up a flight of stairs and then you'd go to a private bathhouse. They found the Hippocrates with an oven that would be fed from the basement. And we all know what the structure of a Roman bathhouse would look like, but a private bathhouse. And they found the toilet over here. And Ezehu Asher Mishiyesh Lo Beit HaKisei Karov L'Shulchano. Who is a wealthy person? Someone who had a private toilet in his own home. So Reb Pinchas ben Yair is seeing the mules in these stables and saying, uh-oh, no way am I going into this house. And here's the rest of the structure of the home, which Abigail suggested was actually 3 stories high. We see the basement in this area, and we see the first Komat Karka in this area, and then, 2 stories high plus the basement. And then another story which no longer exists. But this allows us to fill in the imagery of those white mules of Reb Pinchas ben Yair, and this next story, where Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says, I'm going to take on the Yisurin, Chavivin Yisurin. Yisurin are wonderful because that would mean that Am Yisrael doesn't have to suffer and I can improve my character. So he asked God for all kinds of trials and tribulations. And what did he get? He got 6 years of kidney stones and 7 years of scurvy. Scurvy is something that sailors get. I don't remember exactly how it manifests. Anyway, he had those kidney stones. And as the Midrash describes here, he was so wealthy, and his stable boy was wealthier than most of the wealthy people in the Galil, indicating just how wealthy he was. And he would have the stable boy, when Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi would have to relieve himself, we would be in tremendous pain. And that is when the stable boy fed the horses and the mules or whatever livestock he had, so as to drown out the screams of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Now, the toilet is right over here, and there's actually a installation there that looks like a toilet, and the stables are right over here. So you tell the story, and it's happening right there in front of you. Those are all the slides I have, but I just want to do a very quick 1-minute sikum of what the possibilities are here. The way that I do this is I start at the Pesel Alexander Zaid. I talk about the Nof in a general sense, and then I tend to hone in on the biblical stories, taking advantage of this great Nof to capture what there is to tell. Definitely the Carmel and those stories, and the Emek Yisrael stories. I talk about the Nebuah of Hosea, which is very resonant given the Nof that is in front of us. I talk about Zaid and his vision for Hashomer, and how his vision, and then I kind of leave the story there and pick it up later on in the day, how his vision is being realized in our day, in Mitzvot Santo and examples of Hashomer Chadash in action. I talk about the genesis of Yochanan ben Nuri, the genesis of Beit Sha'arim, some of the archaeology, depending on the audience, of Zaid, by the way, I neglected to mention, was the first archaeologist there. He went digging around and actually in the necropolis found some of the inscriptions and said, oh, we're onto something. It was only really determined to be the site of Beit Sha'arim in the 50s, when they started really digging in that necropolis and realized the significance of the place that they were excavating. And then I talk about the process of the Sanhedrin moving from Yavne up to the north and what that meant historically. I talk about the development of Tochva, the development of the Mishnah, the significance of the Kohanim in their Mishmarot in the north. Again, not with every audience, but we pick and choose. And I point out the Basilica. We move our way down to the house of Rebbe. I talk more about the personality of Rebbe and his and how comfortable he was with the Roman rulers at the time, and about the Torah that he taught, how seminal he was to Jewish history. And I talk about these midrashim that take place in his house while pointing out the various different archaeological installations and evidence that we have that tie right into these midrashim. It is a wonderful jump-off point to continue our day in the Galil, Be'ekvot HaSanhedrin. We're starting where the Mishnah was developed and then moving to Tzipori, where the Mishnah was actually written. And I think I'm done. So thank you for bearing with me, and I'm going to unmute everybody and take questions. Oh, you know what? Just unmute yourselves, because I don't know how to unmute you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much. This is amazing. And hold on, let me put myself
I'm
in
going
view.
to stop.